Welcome to our soap videos. This is Luke, week 3.
Wow, moving right along.
We're moving right along, just cruising through here. It helps that we're doing only one a week instead of one a day.
Yeah, exactly. That's very true.
So in week 3, the first couple of weeks we did like one chapter, but that's not the way it's always going to be. In fact, this week sort of I don't know that it speeds up necessarily, but it covers more than one chapter. So
yeah, exactly.
What does week 3 look like here for
Yeah,
you?
so we're in chapter 3, and if you remember, we ended last week with Jesus being 12 and being left in Jerusalem, and then this week we move into John the Baptist and his teachings. So there's a big time gap in there too.
Yeah.
In there, and I'm sure we'll talk about that in a little bit. But John, we get about 20 verses of John on what he's doing.
Yep.
And he is primarily teaching Jews along the Jordan River, and it's new and exciting, and people are like coming out in flocks, and John is a little bit odd, right? He's got a little oddness to him,
A little bit.
but it's also exciting and different. So you got to believe that some people are there for the show, just seeing what's going on. Some people are there because other people are there, but I think a lot of the people are also getting something's coming. Yeah. Something's different. And in fact, John even gets, later in the week, John gets more questions, or I don't know if it's later in the week or not, but John gets questions. Are you the Christ? Yeah. And he answers with, no, I'm just baptizing with water. The guy who's coming after me, he's going to baptize with the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
So, John, of course, knows what's going on, or at least what his piece is. John does make an enemy, Herod, in the area. He criticizes him for some of his actions, especially with the wife that he married, and Herod in return throws him in jail, which is kind of interesting. Then we have Jesus' baptism, which Luke takes 2 verses to do.
How long does it take to baptize?
Right. Luke does spend more time in the next section where he talks about he gives the genealogy of Jesus, and he goes from Jesus all the way back to Adam. I think there was 78 names in there. I didn't count them. I read the commentary.
I didn't even count that.
Yeah. It will be on the test though. So yeah. No, that is one of those things, right? You're going to know some of these words. You're going to know some of these people, and so often you just skim over these guys. Take a minute to read them. And, Methuselah's in there, and, some other people too that we know just from Sunday schools. Yeah. So that's kind of cool.
I would really love to know, and I don't know if there is an answer to this, I would really love to know if there is anybody missing in that list. Because from a history standpoint, if there's nobody missing from that list, that gives us a pretty good picture from Jesus' time.
Ages, you mean?
Going all the way back to Adam, like you said. Right. So the Jewish genealogy didn't require them listing every name as long as the connection was solid.
Right.
So it would be really interesting. Matthew's genealogy doesn't list every name. I'm just curious if Luke's does.
Yeah, interesting.
I don't know.
Interesting point.
I don't know.
So that's chapter 3. Then chapter 4, Jesus is now baptized, and we're going to read a lot of chapter 4. Really 2 big stories. The first one is Jesus being tempted in the wilderness, and then the second, Jesus being rejected in his hometown.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's all like normal. There's things that we pick out, right? So you want to start? You got a couple things you picked out? Yeah. So
there are a few times that we get a historical, like a drop, right? Like here's a pinpoint, and at the beginning of chapter 3, we're told that John began his ministry in the 15th year of Tiberius Caesar. Now, we know when that was, sort of. The problem is, does the 15th year mean so he started in, this is June of 2020, so does that count 2020? Does it count like 2021? Is that whatever?
But we get within a year or two.
So, we can get it within a year or two. So we know that the 15th year of Tiberius was somewhere in the neighborhood of 27, 28, 29 AD. Okay? So we also know that Jesus was born right around 5 BC. So this is going to put him in the early 30s, and in fact, Luke is going to say he began his ministry when he was about 30. Not when he was 30 years old, but when he was about 30. So he's probably in the, say, 32 to 34 years old when this all starts.
Okay.
We do know that he died in AD 33. So there are people, he was 33 years old when he died because it was the year 30. It doesn't work that way. Sorry.
Right.
So
it doesn't
in his
think
late
it's zero,
30s.
right?
Yeah.
Zero,
Well, yeah.
right.
But you can't do that. On the genealogy, Luke's is different. I said Matthew skipped some. Luke's is different. You can, well, I mean, up to a point, through David, but Matthew's goes up to Joseph. Luke's, it doesn't say who it went up to because it's only the men, but because it's different, I think it's Mary's.
Yeah.
And that helps with his humanity, actually, because Luke's emphasis is humanity.
Right.
And so it's really cool that both Joseph and Mary go back to David, but through different sons. Solomon is the royal line, but Mary goes back, assuming this is Mary's, goes back through Solomon's brother Nathan. And that's where the two lines then hit David, and then they both go back.
Same.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
So that's really interesting, but it emphasizes his humanity.
I noticed Joseph is in there in the genealogy, and then there's a little footnote.
Yeah,
that Luke puts in there.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. I think it's his father-in-law. I think is what it's supposed to. I think it says the son. As was supposed, he was the son as was supposed of Joseph, right? Yeah, and the son. In chapter 4, something that I really like to point out in the temptation. A lot of times people think that there were 3 temptations, right? Because they're the only 3 that are listed, right? Jesus goes out into the desert. He fasts for 40 days, and then he's strong enough to be able to pass these 3 temptations. Well, Luke tells us that the devil actually tempted him for those 40 days. It wasn't just the big 3. Those were the big 3 at the end, like his final barrage.
Yeah.
So for 40 days, the enemy is throwing everything he has at Jesus. And then he follows it up. It's like the grand finale at the fireworks show. Here's the big... Yeah.
I'll give you the world.
And when that didn't work, verse 13 says, so when the devil had completed every temptation, which is really a cool connection to Hebrews, where it says that Jesus was tempted in every way just like we are, which some people think Luke wrote Hebrews. So
that is interesting.
I don't know.
That's very interesting.
He departed from him until a more opportune time. He's coming back.
Right. Still there. It wasn't done. Still there.
He's still trying to get Jesus to fold. And then just the first message that Luke recorded that Jesus gave here in Nazareth shows that his work was going to benefit Gentiles as well. It's not just to the Jews. And so, not to mention that there were several murder attempts during his ministry. We'll see one here, but they really tried to kill him several times.
Yeah, I like he walked away.
I love that
one.
Walked through. Like, did he turn invisible? Were they so blind?
We're not doing this.
Were they so blind with rage, mob rule, that they don't pay attention to anything? And he's able to just slip.
Be interesting.
I like the invisible part better.
Yeah.
Where'd you go? I'll go with the invisible one. So those are just some things that I find interesting in this section.
I had a couple that I thought people would like. One thing that I noticed that Luke introduced John the Baptist in chapter 3, verse 1. We're talking about John, and then John is arrested in verse 20, and then the next segment we move into Jesus is baptized, and John's not mentioned in there. Now we know from the other Gospels, John was there. John did the baptism. But the question then becomes, why did Luke omit John from there? And, everybody can come up with their own answer. What I came up with, I'm going to give a visual hint.
Okay.
What I came up with was...
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And we'll see that coming up later, too.
All right, so if you got what he said, if you understood that, I'm not going to say it. If you understood that, make sure that you check in and say, I understood.
I got that one?
Yeah. Yeah. And if you can give bonus points, if you can give chapter and verse.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I got to look up something. Yeah.
Not you, them.
Oh,
right?
okay. Then the second one, you had alluded to it too. So Jesus gets rejected in his hometown, and we know the story. But pay particular attention when you're reading the story. What I picked up this time was, in verse 22, and again the verses don't matter when you're in the story and you forget about it. But in verse 22, everybody's happy, and it said they were all speaking well of him.
Mm-hmm.
Everything's good. Now 5 verses later, in verse 28, they were all filled with rage. So the question is, what happened in those 5 verses? What happened to turn the entire town from being nice, polite, this is a good guy, to literally, let's force him on a cliff and throw him over?
Yeah. Well, he was the hometown. He was the favorite son.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
And
he's starting out that way.
Yeah.
And then him talking caused this change.
Yeah.
But
so that's a good question of how we respond to what we're reading, what we're taught. It's what I'm a Christian, I'm a member of Oak Tree, I'm a whatever. But when we read and study as we're walking the path, how do we respond to the teaching that we hear, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's a good point.
If you're ready to throw Gary off a cliff, don't.
Yes, don't.
Well,
I think that's the 2 that I had this week.
Okay. All right. Good. Well, thanks for watching. Make sure that you get a SOAP card and follow along with the readings a week at a time. And we'll be back next week with another SOAP video. Be sure to subscribe and like our Facebook page, subscribe on YouTube, all of those different things. And we're serious. Give us the feedback, especially if you hear something in here that you have a question about. You like, you don't like, you disagree, you agree, whatever. If you can answer Gary's quiz, you get the bonus points. And we'll see you next week.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.